Hello, everyone. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. Today on our show, we are going to have Randy. Randy is from New York City, but he lives in LA. So let's see what Randy has to say. Enjoy the interview.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello, how are you, Randy?
I'm good. How you doing?
Very well. Thanks so much for taking the time for the interview today. Thank you.
No problem. How's my sound? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me properly as well?
Yes, of course.
Should I call you Randy or Valerio?
Randy's my first name. You can call me Randy.
Perfect. So how's your day going so far, Randy?
Not too bad. How about yourself? What time is it over there in the UK?
Now it's 8:30 in the evening.
Oh, okay. It's not too late. Good.
Raining, cold,
I
London.
know. It's been raining here in LA. It's the first sunny day we've had in a week, which is surprising because it's usually supposed to be sunny out here.
So you live in LA or just visiting, or that's where the place where you live right now?
I'm originally from New York City, but I moved to LA at the end of 2019.
And why the move from New York to LA?
Well, I was actually living in Boston before I moved out here. I'm originally from New York, from Queens, and probably about 2012, I moved to Boston for a job and a girl, neither of which I have anymore. But I'd started my comedy career in Boston, and a friend of mine who I opened for, my good buddy Jeff Dye, was trying to convince me to move out to LA for a few years. So finally, my lease on my apartment was up in Boston, and I decided to make the move.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your career as a comedian. Tell me how everything started.
Sure. Well, I actually started out as an investment banker and a private equity executive. I was doing that for like 11 years after college. I graduated from Brown in 2005. And I'd always been a comedy fan since I was 9 years old. And I watched George Carlin's, one of his HBO specials, Jamming in New York, that came out, I think, in 1992. So I was probably like 9 or 10 years old when I saw that. And I'd always been a fan, but I never thought, I would actually get into comedy. But about 6 years ago when I started, I'd become friends with a couple comedians prior to that. And, they told me I was funny and I should give it a shot, but I never really thought it would pan out. But then the company I was working for ended up getting sold and they gave me a severance package. So I was going to take, a year off and just travel and, see the world a little bit and then get back to work. But my comedian friends called me up. They said, look, you got, nothing but free time now to give it a shot. So I did. I went and did an open mic. My first time doing comedy was September 6th, 2016. And I bombed so bad, but I loved it. It was so exhilarating. So I decided to stick with it.
Tell me the day when you did this for the first time. How was your emotions? How was your nerves? Did you kind of got ready for it, or you kind of was? Did you end up the way you were expecting or not?
Oh, no. So I took about 3 months before I decided to go get on stage for the first time to just try and write 5 minutes worth of material, because that's typically how long you do. And I wasn't sure if any of it was funny or not. I'm just starting out. And, I wrote some jokes and I went to a place in Cambridge, Massachusetts called the Middle East, which I think still exists. It was like one of their longest running open mics. I went there with a friend of mine who was also a comedian. And I was obviously extremely nervous. And when I got on stage, it was almost like an out-of-body experience. Like I was almost watching myself tell the jokes, and none of them worked. And like I said, when you do poorly in comedy, they call it bombing, and I bombed terribly. But there was something so exhilarating about it that I had to do it again and again and again until I got good at it. Until I wanted to get good at it. And that's, I think, what kind of kept me going. I remember my buddy Chase, who was with me at that night. He a few weeks later, after doing it multiple times a night, repeatedly, he's like, "Man, you take a bombing like a champ," But that's how I knew I'd be able to make it through and try to make a career of it. I'm still, and nowhere near a household name or anything like that. But it was just, like I said, just to do something that I'd always loved and to do something I really, really cared about and was passionate about. I'd liked my jobs before and they were challenging, but it wasn't like an internal push that made me do that. Comedy for me is much more personal. So, like I said, it was exhilarating, even though I was terrible at it. And I just wanted to keep going, and try to get better. I feel like it's one of the few honest jobs you can get out there. If people pay you to make them laugh and they leave happy, so I don't feel like I'm screwing anybody over or I'm, all the thoughts that I'm talking about on stage are my own. I feel like it's a very honest way to earn a living, and it's a real meritocracy because there's no barriers to entry. Anyone can sign up for an open mic, and if you keep going and get good enough, people will start booking you to do shows and pay you to do them. So for me, I felt like if I could make it happen, if I can make a little career in comedy for myself, it would be a real achievement.
What I believe is about comedy is, I think, comedians, actors, I think people in the work in this business, I think it's one of the most difficult things to do is to make people laugh. You need to be good at it. You need to, you know what I mean? As you said, you need to find a way to be yourself at the same time. You need to kind of have the gift of, you know what I mean, doing it and acting or doing the joke, because it's not easy. That's what I believe.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not easy, and it's funny. Me and other comedian friends of mine talk about it. It's the only job that actually gets easier with time. Like the first time you go up, you're never gonna, your material's not gonna be good. Your performance aren't gonna be good because you haven't performed like that before. But as you do it, it gets easier and easier. And as you do it, the venues in which you perform are better set up for comedy. Starting out, I was doing comedy anywhere that they'd have me on stage. And I'd be at a busy bar where they're watching a game and then I'd pay attention to me. I've done comedy at the park before, just for strangers walking by, but as you get better, you get booked into comedy venues that are set up for comedy. So you're basically better set up for success, and your ability to deliver jokes and write quality jokes gets better. So you kind of start out at the hardest level setting. And as time goes on and you get better, it gets easier. But it's certainly challenging every time, because it's the only art form where you're only as funny as your last joke. Nobody cares how funny you were last night because they're in the room tonight. Nobody, and unlike music, as an example, where they usually want you to play your hits. Nobody wants to hear Billy Joel's new stuff. They want to hear his old stuff that they're familiar with. With comedy, it always has to be new. Everyone wants the next joke. What's new? What else are you talking about? Absolutely. So I think part of what draws me to it is that every day, every night on stage, you have to, reestablish yourself. And the challenge of it definitely keeps it exciting, for sure.
I see. Okay, so through the game, I'm going to explore more about your career, about, your jokes as well. Are you ready to go on a beautiful journey through your memories of life and share your point of views?
Let's do it, buddy.
Amazing. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. So it's my best friend. From the fun questions. I'm just going to play a song now just for us to relax a bit before the first question, okay?
It's all right.
Let's do it. Okay, Randy, so before we start the game, during the journey, if it comes up a question that you don't want to talk about for some reason, you don't want to answer, always can change, okay?
All right, I'm an open book.
Let's do it. First question for you is, what is the weirdest dream you ever had?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I'll tell you about a recurring dream that I have. It's more of a nightmare, and I don't know where it comes from, but it's been probably 15, 20 years. Every night, every couple of months I'll have it. But I have a weird dream where I see a plane crash, and I'm not on the plane, but I'll be walking or driving somewhere, and a big plane will come and crash near me or crash into the building that I'm in. And I don't know what that's about. I traveled a lot for my previous job, and I obviously travel a lot for comedy. So maybe that's part of it. I'm a native New Yorker, so maybe 9/11 somehow that seeped into me. But that's like a really weird recurring nightmare that I have that I don't know what it means and why I have it. But that's just one, that I can think of. And I should probably talk to a therapist about it at this point. It's been a while since I've had it, so I should try and figure out where it comes from.
It's funny to say about 9/11. Today, actually, I was talking to a friend about that. We were talking about what we were doing at the time when it happens. You live in New York, yeah? Tell me first, where were you at the time? And tell me about the day. How did you find out about, the situation? Where were you? And so walk me through that day in New York.
Sure. So I actually wasn't in New York. I just moved earlier that week to college. It was my first week at university, at Brown University. On the day of, I'd gotten up early. I don't know what woke me up, but I got up early, threw on the TV, and I saw on the television that obviously the news was carrying the story, and it was before the second plane had hit. So the first building was smoldering, and Tower 2, I think it was, got hit first. And obviously I was in shock. No one knew what was going on. And then I saw live as the second plane hit. Then me and everyone else, you know, my roommate I woke my roommate up. We started to panic because he was also from New York, a different part of New York. But we didn't know what was going on. And the scariest part was at that point, the phone stopped working because everyone was trying to call to figure out, you know, where their loved ones were in New York and what was happening. So I couldn't get through to my family for about 4 or 5 hours. So that was frightening. I mean, you know, I had a bunch of friends who, you know, who were dads were firemen, cops. Thankfully, my mother and my family didn't work downtown, but they were still in New York, and we, you know, everyone was panicking. No one knew. We thought we were under attack, and we were, you know, as a country. So I didn't really know what to think of it, and I was scared. But it was nice. It was nice having the people in my dorm. So they sort of came into my room, and we're all kind of huddled around the TV, and very supportive, and we're all kind of together. So there was in that dark time, there was a weird sense of togetherness that I kind of hold on to from it, because that was like a beautiful part of a horrible tragedy. And that lasted for several months after. But that day, it finally, you know, sometime later in the afternoon, I got in touch with my family. Everyone was okay. You know, I found out days later, some of my friends had lost, you know, fathers and uncles and loved ones, which was horrible. But I got on the first bus that I could get back down to New York. It was a Tuesday when it happened, and I got back to New York on a Friday just to be with my family and go see this, you know, go to the crash site just to pay my respects. And like I said, it was a very ominous feeling, but like I said, there was a sense of togetherness on the day and the weeks that followed that New Yorkers had, that was really something special to take from a really, really big tragedy. And I try to remember that more than anything else, you know, because for a minute there, we're all together, you know, we're all sort of supporting each other. And that, like I said, that was the sort of the silver lining in an otherwise horrible day. But it did impact me a lot. I mean, my high school that I went to was actually located downtown New York, and they closed it down for a year because debris had fallen on the building and they had to get structural support in and all that. So a lot of my high school friends for the next 8 months had to attend different high schools around New York City because the one I went to was closed. But they reopened a year later, and things slowly but surely got back to whatever the new normal was. But yeah, it was it was a surreal time, you know. It's like you know, we hadn't had anything like that happen in the United States ever, really. And then the close thing is Pearl Harbor, and that was 60, 70 years ago. But like I said, what I try to remember is just that sense of togetherness that we had right after, that I think, you know, showed the better part of humanity in the face of the worst parts of humanity, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And I was back in Brazil actually at the time. I was actually 6 months before I moved to Europe, and I remember exactly like you. I was kind of half asleep. I was working during the evening, and my flatmate came up to me and said, "William, there's something happening on TV, like in New York. It's not sure. I'm quite lost." That's when the first plane, the second plane as well happened. She came up, she said, "William, you need to see that. I think it's something really serious." And I think the world, as you said, I think the whole world got together somehow regarding that, you know, the situation. My God,
I'm actually interested to how you know, you being the Brazilian national, you were in Brazil at the time. I was always curious as to how the international community received that, because, you know, obviously you're not an American, you're not from New York, but I think when you see a tragedy that vast, there's an empathy that comes out of people. And I would hope that the rest of the world sort of got that sense as well, you know?
We forgot that. I mean, we even didn't think about, you know, we are here, they are there. We thought about a big nation, I think, you know what I mean? I remember the feeling. I think everyone felt the same. Of course, as a New Yorker living in the US, for sure, it must be much harder to deal with or to feel it, but somehow we felt as well. I think, well, as I said, people, they talk before 9/11 and after 9/11. You know what I mean? There's always that. Another friend of mine from Berlin, actually, he was flying from Berlin to New York, and halfway, they need to go back.
Turn around.
Yeah, can you imagine? And I remember he said, really was so weird, and was because it wasn't clear. The pilot just said something happened, but wasn't clear, and everyone couldn't, you know. I think everyone has a story to tell regarding that moment in the world. London, have you been in London before? Do you know London or not?
Yeah, I went to London once many years ago for about a week, but I'm slightly familiar with it. It was more for business than pleasure, but I'm familiar with it.
Right. So there's an area called Canary Wharf in London where they had the big.
That's where I stayed. Matter of fact, that's where.
Oh really? Yeah. Amazing. I like Canary Wharf. So anyway, so during the time, the same day, all the buildings, they were evacuated because they, was a target. So people don't know what.
Nobody knew who was next. You know. So.
Anyway, it's been now 22 years. My goodness.
I know.
It-
It's a lifetime ago, but it feels like yesterday.
As I said, talking to you now, I feel like it happened last week or something like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Next question, Randy. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Next question for you is, what's the best and the worst of living in LA?
The best, I mean, it is physically gorgeous. It's it rains, 20 days a year here. There's the beach, there's the mountains. I'm a little bit of a amateur outdoorsman. I like to go hiking and camping and backpacking. And growing up in New York City, I didn't see a lot of grass or a lot of trees. It was it was a concrete jungle, really. But here you have a lot more of that. I'm able to get out into the wilderness more, which I love. And obviously it's a great place for comedy as well. I'd say the downside, or the thing that I miss most about living back east, are the people. The people on the East Coast, New Yorkers, have a certain culture, have a certain chip on their shoulder, whatever you want to call it, that I sort of identify with. There's sort of a no BS policy in New York. People don't tolerate fools very easily in New York. And that's what I miss most, is the people. I like to joke around with my friends here in LA. I tell them, like, if I can make LA perfect, I'd move everyone from New York to LA and everyone from LA into the ocean. Because it's weird. Like, LA has a weird culture or a weird history of being sort of known as being laid back. But the people in the city are very, very image conscious and can be very uptight in ways that they just aren't, back east in New York. So I think that's what I miss most. But other than that, I mean, this place is gorgeous. As I said, the sun and the palm trees and the outdoor activities. It's I can't complain.
So for a comedian, for you, do you think LA is the best place to be, like than New York or other place in the US?
Yeah, well, so I started in Boston, which is a great city to start out in because it has a long history of comedy and a deep comedy culture, and has a lot of rooms, a lot of open mics, and a lot of bar shows and smaller venues that you can sort of cut your teeth and practice on. But I think if you're going to make it big, you're going to have to spend some time in either New York or LA or both. Being that I was born and raised in New York, I'd spent almost 30 years there before I moved to Boston. I was like, I could always go back to New York because I had my family there, friends and whatnot. But, I got to give LA a shot to see if, there's something here for me. And so far, I haven't regretted it. Like I said, I could always go back to New York if I want to or need to. The comedy scene is very different, is different in many ways, just because in New York, there's so much comedy, so many venues, and everything's so close together. And you have the subway, so you can do 3, 4, 5 shows a night if you're really hustling. In LA, if you're doing 2 shows a night, you're really pushing it because, LA is just so much bigger and more spread out than New York, and you have to drive everywhere. So you're stuck in traffic trying to get from one venue to the next. So I think if you're a young aspiring comedian and you want to spend as much stage time, or want to get as much stage time as possible, New York's probably better for you. But for me personally, like I said, I'd experienced New York already. A lot of other younger comedians haven't. So I know what life is like in New York. They don't know that. So I think, maybe it's better for them to go there. And it was probably better for me to give this place a try before I, end up back in New York at some point in my career.
And do you see yourself living in LA for a long while?
At least a few more years. I don't want to move back to New York until I'm a little bit more established, because every time you move, you have to, you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because no one in the comedy scene knows you here, right? So if I establish myself a little bit more, I think moving back to New York would be a little bit easier and more fun for me. I haven't exhausted all of my avenues for success here for sure. I think there's a lot of room for me to grow in LA. So I'll probably try to stay here for another 2-3 years at minimum before I think about moving back east.
I see. Okay, next question, Randy. Let's do it. Before the next question, tell me what's the best joy of being a comedian, and also the flip side, what's the most challenging part?
I'd say the biggest joy is being on stage and making people laugh. I mean, when it's going well, you feel like you're the conductor of an orchestra. They laugh when you want them to laugh. They get quiet when you want them to get quiet. They ooh and ah right when you want them to. And it's a little bit of like a dance with the audience. It's that adventure of it, And like I said earlier, my other favorite part is the honesty involved with it. As a comedian, not only is it, am I allowed to tell the truth because no one can fire me from being a comedian. I'm just a guy working on his own. The crowd almost expects it of you. They want to know what your real feelings are. And you want to be funny about it, and you can exaggerate, of course. but having that honesty and really that when something resonates with the crowd, like I said, you sort of form a connection and start a little dance, and that's incredible for me. The downside, I mean, it's tough making it, you know, and it's not a lot of money starting out, and you're going to struggle, and things are not going to happen as fast as you want, or sometimes things will come that you're not ready for. There's parts of it that I never thought I'd have to deal with, like in the social media coach that we have today. I'm spending a lot of time cutting clips, putting them on the internet, doing this and that, learning how to be an audio visual guy, to learn how to use Photoshop and Pro Tools to post my podcast. Like I have a podcast of my own. So there's a lot of the technical stuff that I didn't know I'd have to get into. I just thought I'd be writing jokes and performing. So there's a lot more involved to it than I thought. But, at the end of the day, if you can build a small audience of people that want to see you, you can make a living doing it. And like I said, it's an honest living. No one can fire you from being you. It's not like I work for a company. These are my thoughts and my ideas and my jokes. So if people like them and want to come see me and pay me to do so, I'll always have employment. So if you could get it to work, I think it's really a lifestyle that suits me. And I like to travel. Traveling gets exhausting, but when you get to go to a city and for 2 or 3 days and see the best of it and perform every night and then go home, it's nice to see people from different walks of life and different areas of life. It helps. I feel like it grounds me, and it also makes me a better comedian. I'm able to write jokes for different types of people in different types of environments. But like I said, starting out's tough. It's still tough for me now, but I absolutely think it's worth it. Absolutely.
All right. Next question is, what makes you most proud?
What makes me most proud? I mean, my relationships, I would say. All the money in the world won't make people love you. Being loyal to the people that care about you, being there for them when they're in need, and them being there for me. I think, making those connections is what it's really all about, because you don't take any of this stuff with you when you go. All that's left is people's memory of you and your experience with them while you had your short time here. And I think, just the love of my friends and family is the most important thing, and what means the most to me.
Did your family always support you regarding your career?
My family has been incredible about it. My mom, since I was little, all she ever told me and my brother and sister is, I don't care what you guys do. I don't care how much money you make or this or that. I just want you guys to be happy. She just wants us to find our joy in life. And when I decided to stop working in finance and go into comedy, she was 100% behind me, as was my family. I didn't tell them for a while because I didn't want them to show up and see me bomb. So I waited for about a year before I told them what I was up to and before I told them to come out and see me. But they were very supportive. And my mom was just happy I finally found something that brought me joy. Because like I said, my previous career, things were challenging and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I would do if there was no money involved. With comedy, I would do this. If I was a billionaire, I'd still be doing this because this is what I like doing, So there's an honesty to that I really appreciate, like as I said before, and my family's supportive of me through it all. I mean, it brings a tear to my eye if I think about it. Let's not talk about it too much.
No, I want to see you cry. I want to see a comedian cry. And when your mom comes to your show, let's see, do you get nervous or you got used to it?
Well, so the first time she ever came and saw me, she came with my sister, my older sister, Kelly, and my nephew, my sister's oldest son. He had just turned, I think, 20. So he was old enough to come to the comedy club. And at the end of my routine, I had a bunch of jokes about my family in there.
I knew it.
I know. I was talking to the headliner, the guy who I was opening for. I was like, should I do these jokes? It's like, Randy, your parents didn't come, your family didn't come see you for them to do something that you don't normally do. You have to do them, And the jokes can be a little harsh on my family. I'll be honest. I won't tell them here, but they can be a little, I make fun of my family a little bit in my relationship with them, but they laughed. My nephew loved it because I was making fun of his mom. But they loved it and they were supportive, and it was great. The only person I still don't want to come to see me perform is my grandmother. She's in her 90s and she's a very conservative woman, and my jokes are a little dirty sometimes. So even though she wants to come out, I said, Grandma, not until I write 5 clean minutes, then you come out and see that.
At least to say goodbye in the end, just to say bye everyone, at least the end, just for her to get a little bit of your performance.
Exactly. Do a little quick guest set.
Next one. Hey, Randy. Next question is, what is your favorite guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh, that's easy. You'll know this one. Love Island UK. I love Love Island UK. So me and my roommate got into it over the pandemic because obviously we were locked up for months on end here in Los Angeles, and he somehow found the show on Hulu. They had, and now we are committed. Love. I'm watching it. I've thought about starting a podcast just to talk about it. Every night after it airs. I don't know what it's weird. I love the show because it's kind of like watching human beings in the zoo. Because they're like locked in the house and they're trying to find love, but they're all at each other's throats. And there's something very voyeuristic about it and very funny. So it's a little bit of dark humor on my part, but I love it. I love the show. Have you seen Love Island UK?
I haven't watched, but I've seen clips and I've seen, on TV, they always show things, but I never fully watch the episode. Okay. I'm glad to know. I'm going to ask you to answer the next question with your best British accent then.
Oh, I cannot do accents. Oh my God. This is what I'm going to fall flat on.
Next one. For the next one, tell me a little bit about your podcast.
So it airs every Wednesday. It's called the Ready, Set, Blow podcast. And I started it in 2017 with my good buddy, Chase Abel. So he was like my regular co-host until 2022, and then he wanted to start his own podcast, which obviously he was doing well for himself, and he did that because we've been together for 5 years. So now I run it by myself. I have a weekly guest. They range from comedians to actors, musicians. I've had politicians on my show. I've had business executives on the show, and we really just talk about what's going on in our lives in the first half, and in the second half I pick a few choice news stories from lesser known articles that I find funny that we discuss. But it really started because, and it leads to the name, because I have it's weird, big life events I'm pretty good at managing my emotions with, but little things will really, really turn, dig into my side. And, I would get on my soapbox and rant about something stupid like self-checkout machines or, waiting in line at the DMV or, going through TSA security, stupid stuff that we all do every day. And he would sort of laugh and calm me down. And that kind of was the genesis of it. But now, like I said, we talk about, I sort of interview my guest. We talk about current events going on, and then I do some news stories at the end. It's a fun show. It can be a little raunchy at times. It's definitely irreverent. It's always honest. And we do it weekly. So if you guys want to check it out, it's Ready, Set, Blow podcast. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, all the platforms.
Amazing. Okay. Next question is, what is the funniest gift have I ever received?
The funnest gift I've ever received. That's a great question. It's funny. It's not so much a gift, and I was just talking about it this weekend, but for my 28th birthday, my then girlfriend at the time surprised me. She told me to come outside, and there was a van there with all of my friends in it. She's like, "We're going somewhere." I'm like, "Where are we going?" She's getting a van. We'll tell you when we get there. And she took me to medieval times in New Jersey, where they do like the fake jousting and the hawks flying and all that, you eat the big drumsticks. But I didn't know this. I thought it was like a kid's venue, but they have like an adults only section where they serve liquor and get you riled up. And it was just, I was so blown away by being actually surprised by it, because I'm not a surprise guy. I don't like not seeing things come my way. But she figured out a way to not let the word leak out that we were doing this, and she took me out there, and we just had a great afternoon of drinking and eating and laughing at the kids show that we were watching. I would say it's one of my favorite gifts that I've gotten, just because it goes back to my relationship. My friends were there. I don't need physical things. What I value is experiences, and to have an afternoon with 12 of my closest friends that I wasn't expecting to have or to see, and to share the love we have for each other in a fun venue and have a laugh. Those are the meaningful things. Those are the meaningful gifts to me.
Those memories always gonna have special place in our hearts.
Well, that's the thing. I might lose it. If you get me a watch, I might lose it. If you get me a pair of shoes, they're gonna get worn out. But if I have an experience with someone I loved, I keep that forever. Even if I'm in prison, I own that experience, and that's what I value is experience.
Amazing. 3 questions left for you, Randy. Let's do it. Before the next question, as we were talking in the beginning of the interview, that's how difficult it is to make people laugh, yeah? Once I heard, a long time ago, someone said that, let me see, I'm gonna put it right. Any actor any comedian can be an actor, but not every actor can be a comedian. Do you agree with that statement?
I do agree with that statement, and it's not to say that acting isn't difficult, or to diminish that art form in any way. I think at its highest levels, when you look at a guy like Daniel Day-Lewis or somebody like that, it's like he's incredible, and I could, most comedians could never do that. But a lot of times, acting, you're filling a role, and if your personal character lends itself to that role, they'll cast you. So it's a little bit easier to be yourself, and obviously, when you're a stage performer, you're used to performing live, which is a lot easier than performing with a camera where they can take multiple takes. So I would agree with that statement, but that by no means diminishes what actors and actresses do, in their work. I just think it's because, we perform live, it gives us a little bit more of an edge when you're transferring the skills from one direction to the other. Like I can't make a mistake performing live, but they can when they act on film. Obviously, if you're a stage actor and on Broadway or something like that, that's much more analogous to being a comedian. But I would say on the whole, it's easier to transfer from comedy to acting than acting to comedy, because we also have to write our own material for the most part. Actors don't write their own lines a lot of the time, so so we're used to that aspect of it as well.
All right. Next question is: tell us something interesting about yourself or something that not many people know about you.
Well, that's probably one of the things I mentioned earlier. I'm actually, most comedians don't have a traditional background in finance and things like that. I went to an Ivy League school. I was a valedictorian, and I lived a very straight life. And when people see my act on stage, you would never guess that, because I have a New York accent. I swear, I tell off-color jokes. So, I sound, not that I sound dumb, but I certainly don't sound like I'm an Ivy League graduate. But that's one thing that is in my past, and that I often don't tell a lot of people in comedy, just because I feel like they'll look at me differently. Like, what? Why are you doing this then? If you could have been an investment banker all your life, why the hell would you do this job? So I think it throws people off. So I tend not to mention it until you get to know me a little bit more, because I don't think any one experience in my life doesn't define who I am. So just because I went to Ivy League school I don't want you to look at me differently. I want you to accept me for who I am, and then all the things I've done are just things I've done.
See. All right. 2 questions left. Let's do it. Before the next question, I'm going to ask a question in 2 parts, yeah? The first part, the question is, tell me a moment in your career, performing, that you go like, that performer or that night or that audience I'll never forget for some reason. And the other part of the question is, tell me one of your performances that you went like, that didn't go well. For some reason, you couldn't connect with the audience, or you just couldn't get it right for some reason. So tell me both sides, if you can share.
All right, I'll tell you about the first time I killed. Meaning in comedy, killing means wire to wire. The set was great, and I'll tell you about my most memorable bombing. Not my first. I have many bombings, but the first time I did well for the full show, for my full set. I did a 420 cannabis show in, I think it was 2017. I was about a year into doing comedy. And for whatever reason, I put all my jokes together great. And, it was supposed to be a 10-minute set. I ended up doing 15 minutes because I was so on fire. And you're not supposed to run the light. That means go over your time. But the booker saw how well I was doing and just waved me to keep going. Wow. And it was weird. Yeah, it was weird because when you're doing really well, time sort of stops. Like you don't really feel time. The best description or best analogy I can make for it is if you've ever like hit a home run or hit a perfect drive in a golf match, it just clicks off the bat. You don't even feel the ball hitting the bat. It's just tink and it flies away, and all of a sudden it lands exactly where you want it to. It's kind of like that. It almost happens. It's almost like you said, it's almost like you're not in control. It's like you and the room are together in one, for lack of a better analogy. And that was at a show at an upstairs bar. There was probably 50 people there, and it was the first time I got paid. I was not supposed to get paid for the spot.
That's why it went so well. I'm joking.
Yeah. The booker, and after the spot, the booker came over and said, "Hey, I'm not paying anybody else, but here's $20. Go buy yourself a couple beers." And that meant a lot to me. It meant that I earned the money. The worst was also at the Middle East, which is the first place I ever did comedy. It's a bar in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was bombing so bad. I could hear someone in the way back just put down their glass. So like they weren't even booing me or hissing, or it was just dead silent. And hearing that glass hit the table was like a dagger through my heart. I'd rather have the crowd boo me off stage than just completely ignore me the way these people were. And that still haunts me. That sound still haunts me in my head.
Wait a minute, put my glass here on the side.
I know,
right? Right. Next question is, what's your idea of a perfect friendship?
Perfect friendship is where you give more than you receive. I mean, it's my pleasure to sacrifice for the people that I love, and so much so that I had a therapist one time tell me, Randy, sometimes you're going to have to let your friends help you because they want to feel the joy of giving you help. And that really, made a change in my mind that, asking for help from your loved ones is a way to show that you do love each other, because you can't be afraid of losing a friendship because you messed up. Everyone makes mistakes. I make them all the time. And, the being there for my friends is my joy. And, and I'm obviously, I don't want to ask them for their help all the time, but it's nice to know that I have people there to help me when I'm in need. That's really what it's all about. Like I tell my friends, if I have 2 grains of rice, you eat, and I go hungry.
Yeah, I think best friends don't choose; they just happen naturally. You don't go around saying, "Oh, you're gonna be my best friend." It doesn't work like that. So,
no. You just give into the relationship. You give to the relationship, and all of a sudden you become friends.
It's a relationship, like a strong one.
Yeah.
Ready for the last one, Randy?
Let's do it.
Last question. Before the next question, tell me something, based, I don't know, it could be my impression, I don't know, you can tell me. I always had a thing about going to, a stand-up comedy show, of maybe being scared. For some reason, I'm scared that people, the comedian would pick on me or pick on other people. And I went to New York City a few years ago, and I went for the first time to a stand-up comedy show. Maybe you were dead, actually, maybe. I don't remember. I'm sure. Anyway, I remember I went with my best friends, and I remember I got there, I was a bit nervous, and I was like, oh my God. And everyone was sit down at the table. And since the beginning, as soon as I sit down, I said, oh my God, I hope they're not going to pick on me. I hope they're not going to even look at me when they're doing the joke. So tell me, why people have this thing about, in your opinion, do you think people that are scared for some reason, and looking the other side, do you, when you do your jokes, when you kind of interact with the audience, there is a thing that gets your attention with the person, or it just happens naturally?
Yeah, so comedians call it doing crowd work when we address the audience. And I agree with you. Live stand-up comedy is probably the only live show that people go to where they'll ask not to be in the front row, right? Everyone wants to be in the front row at a concert or at a play or at the movies. But in comedy, like, oh, no, don't put me in the front, put me out back so they don't pick on me. I'll tell you right now, most comedians aren't going to engage with the audience unless the audience starts heckling them or engaging them or being too loud at the table or, something like that. There's a handful of comedians who do only crowd work, but that's very rare. But I think it is a thing that people in live stand-up comedy, when they go to shows, they do worry about that. And I don't think they have to, because a lot of times comics are just being playful. They're not going to insult you or, start any trouble with you unless you're the one heckling them. Now, if you heckle the comedian, you better be prepared for the comedian to come back at you. I mean, that's what we do. We're very good verbally, so you're going to lose that battle. I have a microphone and I've been talking for a living for 6 years. So you're going to lose. You're going to lose. So don't insult me, and I won't insult you. But for the most part, I don't think you have to worry about that when you go to live comedy shows. My personal, I don't do a lot of crowd work. I'll do some call and response while I ask the crowd by round of applause. Let me know if you're married, but this or that. But generally, I won't interact with one individual unless they're talking to me. Then I'll talk back with them. But I think a lot of times the interactions are mostly fun. I mean, like I said, it's not like the comic's not there to insult you. The comic, unless you're insulting him or her, the comic's there to make you laugh. And that's what we're trying to do. At the end of the day, comedians want to make you happy. They're not trying to screw up your night or get your girlfriend angry at you or make you want to leave the club. So our intent is always to make you laugh. And I think if people keep that in mind, they'll be a lot less afraid of being involved in a live comedy show.
See. All right. Last question is, what was your worst wardrobe mistake?
My worst wardrobe mistake. Oh man, I'll tell you a funny one. So I like to work out. I'm a bit of a muscular guy, and when I very first started, a mentor of mine, a great comic by the name of Corey Rodriguez out of Boston, one day came up to you after the show. It was the summertime. I was wearing a t-shirt. He's like, you go on stage like that? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you got big arms, man. It could be distracting, And then he kind of laughed it off and walked away. But I was only a few months into comedy, so I thought he was dead serious. And it was like July. So for the rest of the summer, I was wearing long sleeves on stage, even though I was sweating my ass off because I thought my arms were a distraction. So finally, a couple months later, he comes up to me and says, man, why are you wearing long sleeves? It's hot as hell out here. And I said, oh, you told me, 2 months ago that my arms were distracting. He's like, Randy, I was breaking your balls. I'm screwing around. It was a joke. I didn't mean it. So for a whole summer, I was just sweating on stage because I didn't want people to see my arms.
That's funny.
You got me
Okay.
good.
You're not end yet. Let's play now the word association game. I'm going to give away some words. Just tell one word that comes to your mind. Quick thinking. So, I hope you are enjoying the interview. Before we do the word association game, don't forget to give a like. Don't forget to share this video. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Just click on the button right there. Thank you so much and enjoy the word association game. Money.
Work.
How about family?
Love.
One word for life.
Struggle.
Sex.
Fun.
Love.
Work.
Politics.
Again.
Oh yes, a lot of work can be. Politics.
Boring.
Religion.
A crutch.
Fear.
Overcome.
Friendship.
Loyalty.
Desire.
Passion.
Regrets.
Oh, regret. I'm sorry, it's more than one word, but I always think of Frank Sinatra's regrets. I have a few, too few to mention.
I'm not gonna go into that, okay? I'll leave on the side.
All right.
One word for success.
Perseverance.
Wish.
Wish, you got to work. You can't wish anything. Nothing comes without hard work.
Happiness.
Contentment.
One word for New York City.
Tough.
One word
Gotta
for
be tough.
one word for LA.
That's a good one. One word for LA. I'd say beautiful.
USA.
Oof. USA. Complex.
If you could find one word your podcast, just one word, what would be?
One word. Oof. Rage. A lot of anger involved, just blowing off steam.
And the last one now, comedian, one word.
Comedian. Truth teller.
Interesting. Let's pretend now I'm going to meet your best friend for a coffee and I'm going to ask your best friends, what is the most beautiful thing about Randy and what's something that he still needs to work on, to improve on? What your best friend would say?
I think they would say I'm extremely loyal, but I make a lot of mistakes. Yeah. I'm
not gonna go there, okay? I'm not gonna go there.
All right, we all do. That's the thing about friendship. The thing about friendship is, it's not hard to. It's easy to hurt the ones you love because they're closest to you and they expect more of you, and you expect more of yourself.
It's so true. You said something now. A good friend of mine, he told me that once when we had a crush. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, Billion, we just hurt people who we care about, we love, we have connection with. And actually that stood to my head actually when he told me that, because I never thought about that. And when he said that, it makes sense. It makes so sense.
It's hard to disappoint someone who doesn't love you.
Yeah.
If they care for you, that's the only way you can disappoint them. If I don't care about somebody, what do I don't care about them.
That's so true. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's play now, Randy, and the magic box, and you can ask me a question. But before you ask me the question, tell me, people, if they come to your show, to your perform, what they gonna come something unique about your perform or your show that they might not find anywhere else.
Yeah, I think my act really resonates with people because what I try to touch on are the things inside that we all think and feel but don't act on, because we're not monsters. We all can be selfish or greedy or resentful or angry, and sometimes your first thought is not the way you want to behave. But I'll talk about having that first thought because we all do. Like you want to do this, but you act a certain way because you know how to behave correctly. So I think that touching on that in my comedy is what creates like a resonance and a connect with the audience. And you'll get that. Well, I'm going to make you laugh at yourself because I'm laughing at myself. Like it's, don't we all do this horrible thing in our head, but not in real life? Well, that's what I like talking about. I like talking about that sort of that evil inside voice, that negative voice that pops up that you shouldn't listen to, but nonetheless is there. And I try to make that connection. Like, hey, we're all not perfect. That's really what my show's about. We're all not perfect. And here's an example from my life. That's what I go with.
Amazing. Can I ask me a question now?
Yeah, I wanted to know, since I was looking at your YouTube channel, you've done dozens of interviews. What's the most difficult part about interviewing complete strangers? I mean, because you and I just connected over DM and you have your magic box, but how do you create, because we've had a good conversation. How are you able to create such a quick rapport with people you barely know?
Interesting, very interesting your question, Randy. And I'll tell you something. I think actually I don't see like a difficult time, but for example, for me, the best part of the show, people ask, what do you like the most about interviewing people, different parts of the world? And it's so simple. I'll tell you something now. For example, the same way when I connect you for the first time, when I contact you on social media, that I contact most of my guests on the show. But the best moment for me, I'll tell you now, as soon as I send the request here on Zoom, and and my guest accept the invitation, and I see my guest for the very first time, that's for me is the most joy. Because first, I don't know, who they are. I saw the pictures, I saw maybe a video or something, but I don't know how they look like. I don't know how they're gonna come across. I don't know anything about it. And as soon as I start connecting with my guests, that's when the magic happens, and that's the biggest joy for me, because I'm sure I'm gonna learn something new. I'm gonna like explore something that I never talked before, or I'm gonna talk about things that maybe I never thought about it. So there's all about that. For me, sometimes when I find, let's say, the most difficult part sometimes is maybe I don't know, maybe something that maybe I couldn't get into it for some reason, or I couldn't connect with my guests. But most of the time, I would say 90% of the interviews I've done, I had the privilege that my guests felt comfortable talking to me. We had this connection, and I think that that's the best parts. I think it's difficult for me. The difficult because for me, I forget that I'm recording. I just remember when I look here in the corner, because I'm just having a talk. I'm just talking. I'm just exploring. I'm just like learning. I'm just connecting, and I think that's the biggest joy of that, because in every interview they're different for me. I sometimes, of course, come up the same question like sometimes, but there's always a different answer. There's always a different point of view. There's always a different way of answering it. And that's for me the same pleasure to feel when you are there, like connecting. It's the same pleasure that I feel right now as well. And I could do this.
A lot of sense.
It does.
To connect with a stranger, to know that somebody else is like you, even though you don't know them.
Yes.
Like they have the same desires and values, and they want the same things in life, out of life.
Totally. There is something interesting, and it's through those over 800 interviews, I realized that we are so different, but at the same time as well, we are very similar. I think all of us, we are here to be in a better place. Could be spiritual, could be financially, anything. We just want to improve ourselves. We don't want to be a better person. We want to live life, to leave our signature somewhere or somehow. So that's what I already realized about the show. We are very different, but at the same time we are very similar as well.
That makes total sense, man.
Did you enjoy the interview?
Yeah, I had a good time, man. This is fun. I like your magic box. Good questions in there.
I'll tell you something now. I'm going to tell you something very interesting now, Randy. I had a few comedians on the show, yeah, from different parts of the world. And for some reason, you are the first one that it didn't intimidate me. First, as I said, when I question about...
Oh, thank you.
For some reason, as I said, when I have here on the show, you know, like people in this business, like, you know, comedians, because somehow they, I don't know, I always feel a little bit intimidated, but for some reason, I think as soon as you start talking, I felt relaxed a bit.
Oh, good.
But
I'm glad. I'm glad.
I think when you said, when you did that joke about, was quite funny about if you could move New Yorker to LA.
Oh, in LA to the ocean.
I love that.
Yeah, my friends in LA don't like that, but I tell it anyway.
No, thanks so much for being so open and so kind and accept the invitation. Before you go, if you can share a positive message or something that you live by.
Yeah, it's actually, you know, I looked up a quote that kind of encapsulated it, but it's Nelson Mandela, and I keep it on my phone at all times. You know, and it goes: "The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time you fail." You know, and I mean, because look, you know, it's life is going to be full of failures and disappointments, and you're going to let people down, and people are going to let you down. But you know, you have to get up. You can't give up. You know, it's not a way to live a life. You know, you have to keep going until the end.
All of us, we're gonna fall somehow, you know, some point of our lives. But the biggest challenge is how you're gonna pick yourself up and you know, stand up again.
That defines your character. The getting up. That's who you really are. The failure is not who you are. The getting up, that defines your character.
And if through your life it's not, you don't have failure, you start to wonder, because that's part of life. Failing is part of the success.
I tell my friends that it's like, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough in many ways.
Very good. Not easy, but it's part of the journey.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks so much. Take care, and we keep in touch. It was a pleasure.
All right, thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it, William. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So, did you like the show? Don't forget to give a like, to share it, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to be part of the show as well, first, subscribe to our channel, and after that, just go to our website, www.williamandthemagicbox.com, and send us a request saying why would you like to be part of the show. And I see you there. Bye bye, see you next time.